My name's Jacob Turner. And the worst thing I ever did wasn't a crime against the law. It was a crime against a man who trusted me more than anyone else ever had. I wish I could tell you this is just another story of bad choices. But no. It's the kind of sin that keeps you awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why God hasn't struck you down yet. The man I betrayed wasn't some stranger. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. He was an old shopkeeper, Mr. Raymond. Everyone in our town knew him. He was the kind of man who remembered your name, who'd slip a piece of candy into your bag when you were a kid, even if your family couldn't afford much. To me, he was more than just the man behind the counter. He was like family. But one night, when the shelves were quiet, when the only sound was the hum of the old freezer in the back, I did something I can never take back. I stole from him. Not just a few dollars, not just loose change from the register. I took everything, every bill, every coin, the savings he'd spent years stacking away in a rusty metal box under the counter. And the worst part? The very next morning, when I walked into that shop, he smiled at me like nothing had changed, like I was still his friend, like I hadn't just ripped his world apart. That smile haunts me more than any punishment ever could. I remember the weight of that money in my backpack as I walked home that night. It wasn't just paper bills. It felt like bricks on my shoulders, pressing me down with every step. The straps dug into my skin, and no matter how many times I shifted it, it didn't feel lighter. My palms were sweaty, and the smell of dust and old coins lingered on my hands. When I got home, I dumped it all on my bed. Stacks of faded bills, some crisp, some so worn you could barely make out the faces. Coins that clinked and rolled across the mattress. For a moment, I just stared at it. This was supposed to feel like winning, like freedom. Instead, my stomach turned. The room smelled like stale paper and copper, and all I could hear was the hum of my ceiling fan chopping the silence into pieces. The next morning, I almost didn't go to the shop. My legs wanted to take me anywhere else, but my pride, or maybe my fear of raising suspicion, dragged me there. The bell above the shop door jingled, the same way it had my whole childhood. That familiar creak of the wooden floorboards under my shoes, the faint scent of ground coffee beans and peppermint candies in the air. It all hit me at once. And there he was, Mr. Raymond, standing behind the counter in his old beige sweater with holes at the elbows, wiping down the glass jar of Jawbreakers. His silver hair was sticking out in the back, like he'd forgotten to comb it that morning. He looked up, saw me, and smiled. "Morning, Jacob," he said, his voice rough but warm, like sandpaper on wood. That one word, my name, cut deeper than a knife. He didn't know. Or maybe he did. And just chose not to let on. I nodded back, pretending everything was fine, but my throat was dry, and I couldn't hold his gaze for long. Every time he handed me a soda, every time he laughed at one of my dumb jokes, it felt like he was piling bricks of shame onto my chest. And yet, I kept showing up, because in some twisted way, I needed that punishment. I needed his kindness to remind me just how filthy I'd become. The guilt didn't just stay in the shop. It followed me everywhere, like a shadow that didn't need the sun. At night, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie in bed staring at the cracks in my ceiling, tracing them with my eyes like crooked roads. The bills sat in a shoebox under my bed, and I swear I could hear them rustling in the dark like they were whispering to me. Sometimes I'd get up, open the box, and just stare at the money. The smell of old paper mixed with the faint scent of mildew from the box. It made me nauseous. But I couldn't throw it away. I couldn't spend it either. It just sat there, rotting me from the inside. Walking through town became a different kind of torture. Every time a police car rolled by, my chest tightened. The sound of the tires on gravel, the distant static of their radios. I'd freeze, waiting for them to stop. My hands would go clammy, and I'd shove them deep into my pockets, hiding the invisible crime stamped on my skin. Even the people around me started to feel like mirrors. Mrs. Langston, who always sold pies at the farmer's market, gave me her usual smile one morning. But I swear, behind her kind eyes, there was something sharper, like she knew. Kids laughed on the corner, tossing a football back and forth. But when one of them glanced at me, my stomach dropped. I imagined them whispering, "That's the thief." And yet, the cruelest part was still Mr. Raymond. He'd wave at me from the shop window when I passed, sometimes pressing a peppermint into my palm when I stopped by. Sweet tooth never hurt anyone, he'd chuckle. But that candy burned on my tongue. It was supposed to be sweet, but all I tasted was shame. I started avoiding mirrors, too. Every time I caught my reflection, shop windows, car mirrors, the bathroom sink, it felt like I was staring into the eyes of someone I didn't recognize. Someone hollow. Someone who had traded his soul for a pile of bills he couldn't even touch. Sleep stopped being a refuge. It became a punishment. When I did manage to drift off, the dreams came. Always the same. I'd be standing in Mr. Raymond's shop, the bell above the door chiming. But instead of shelves lined with candy jars and soda bottles, the place was empty, just rows of dusty shelves stretching into the dark. I'd hear his voice calling my name, low and tired, echoing in the emptiness. When I turned, there he was, holding the shoebox of money. His hands shook, his eyes wet. And just when I reached for him, the floor gave way, and I was falling, deeper and deeper, into blackness. That's when I'd wake up, gasping, with sweat soaking my sheets. The days weren't much better. Food lost its taste. Coffee turned bitter. Bread felt like chalk. My body was there, going through the motions, but my mind was locked in that shoebox under the bed. Every time I opened my closet, I half expected the money to crawl out on its own, choking me with paper hands. My chest hurt more often, a sharp squeeze like someone pressing a fist against my heart. I blamed the stress, but deep down I knew what it really was. The weight of a sin pressing down, heavier than I could carry. I started avoiding Mr. Raymond's shop altogether. Crossing the street when I saw it, pretending I didn't hear him when he called out. But somehow, that only made it worse. Guilt has a way of finding you, no matter how many corners you turn. And then came the moment that shattered everything. One cold evening, I passed by the shop again. Lights were still on, though it was late. Through the window, I saw Mr. Raymond sitting alone behind the counter, his shoulders slumped, his head in his hands. A single lamp lit the room, casting long shadows on the walls. He wasn't counting money. He wasn't cleaning up. He was just sitting there, broken. That image burned into me. My throat tightened, and for the first time, I realized I hadn't just stolen money. I had stolen trust. I had stolen a man's peace, the thing he gave freely because he believed in me. And I had turned it into ash. The night I broke, it wasn't planned. I remember sitting in my room, the shoebox under my bed, whispering like a demon. I couldn't stand it anymore. My chest ached, my hands shook. I pulled the box out, dumped the money on the floor. Crumpled bills scattered everywhere, the smell of paper and dust filling the room. It didn't smell like wealth. It smelled like rot, like betrayal. I stuffed the bills back into the box, slammed the lid shut, and before I knew it, I was running. My legs carried me down the quiet streets, past flickering street lamps and barking dogs, until I stood in front of Mr. Raymond's shop. The open sign glowed faintly, though the hour was late. My breath came in sharp bursts as I pushed the door open. The bell chimed. A sound that had once felt like home now pierced my ears like a judgment. Mr. Raymond looked up from behind the counter. His face was pale, drawn, the kind of tired that seeps into your bones. When his eyes met mine, something inside me snapped. I couldn't speak. My throat was dry, my tongue heavy. Instead, I staggered to the counter, dropped the shoebox on it with a loud thud, and pushed it toward him. The silence was unbearable. He didn't reach for the box. He just stared at me, his eyes narrowing, then softening in a way I'll never forget. "You," he whispered. His voice wasn't angry. It was broken. Just one word, but it cut me deeper than any scream could have. Tears burned my eyes. My legs shook. "I'm sorry, Mr. Raymond." I took it. I thought it would fix things, I thought. My voice cracked, but it ruined me. I can't carry it anymore. He didn't move, didn't yell, didn't call the police. He just leaned back in his chair, his hands trembling as they covered his face. And then, after what felt like forever, he spoke again. "I trusted you, Jacob, more than anyone, and you broke me." The weight of those words pressed down like a mountain. I wanted him to yell, to hit me, to do anything but sit there with tears slipping through his fingers. That quiet pain was worse than any punishment I could imagine. After that night, nothing was ever the same. Word got out fast. Small towns are like that. News spreads quicker than wildfire in July. By morning, it felt like every pair of eyes on Main Street carried the same look. Disappointment, disgust, betrayal. Folks I'd grown up with wouldn't even nod my way. Mothers pulled their kids a little closer when I walked by, like I was some kind of disease. The hardest part wasn't the whispers. It was the silence. The people who had once laughed with me, slapped me on the back, invited me over for dinner. They just looked through me like I didn't exist. I became a ghost while still breathing. Mr. Raymond never pressed charges. That's what stung the most. He could have destroyed me with a phone call, but instead, he left me to destroy myself. His mercy wasn't forgiveness. It was a mirror. Every time I saw him walking past me on the street, carrying his bag of groceries with those slow, tired steps, my chest tightened like a vice. One evening, I sat outside the old diner, watching through the foggy window as Mr. Raymond sat in his usual booth. His coffee sat untouched, steam curling lazily into the air. The waitress tried to make small talk, but he only nodded politely. His eyes, once full of warmth, now seemed to carry a shadow that I had put there. I wanted to go in, to beg again, to throw myself at his feet if I had to. But something stopped me. The thought that maybe the most painful punishment wasn't rejection, but knowing I had stolen the last piece of faith he had in humanity. And that's when it hit me. I hadn't just stolen his money. I had stolen his trust, his peace, his belief that the world was still good. And that's a debt I could never repay. Years have passed since that night. But time doesn't erase what you've done. It only etches it deeper. I moved from that town eventually, thinking maybe distance would dull the weight on my chest. But you can't outrun yourself. Every new place, every new face, I carried the same shadow. Whenever someone offered me kindness, a meal, or a smile, my mind would flash back to Mr. Raymond, the man who trusted me more than anyone, and how I shattered him. I never built much of a life. Tried working odd jobs, but nothing stuck. Not because I wasn't capable, but because guilt rotted me from the inside out. Relationships slipped through my fingers. I couldn't look someone in the eye for too long without feeling like a fraud. Sometimes at night, I still hear the jingle of the bell above his shop door, that little chime that used to feel like home. I hear the scrape of the register drawer sliding open, the clink of coins, the hum of Mr. Raymond's voice greeting me. Then it all collapses into silence, and I wake up with sweat on my forehead. I've written letters to him over the years, letters I never sent. Pages filled with apologies that feel smaller each time I read them back. What good are words when the damage is permanent? Maybe that's my punishment. Not prison, not a record. Just the knowledge that I betrayed the one man who called me a friend when no one else did. And if you're listening to this, if you're younger than me and think temptation is just a quick choice with no consequences, remember my story. Regret doesn't fade. It doesn't forgive. It carves you hollow until all that's left is a man who once had a chance at a good life and threw it away for a pocket full of stolen bills. That's who I am now. That's who I'll always be.